Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, today we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9. Chapter 9, Text 1. Shri Shukavacha, Atmamayam Riterachan, Atmamayam Riterachan, Atmamayam Riterachan, Parasyano Bhavavatmaha, Parasyano Bhavavatmaha, Parasyano Bhavatmanaha, Parasyano Bhavat. Nakate Tata Sambandhaha, Nakate Tata Sambandhaha, Swapna Drashturij Ivanchasa, Swapna Drashturi Vanchasa, Shishukuvacha, Atmamayam Riterachan, Parasyano Bhavatmanaha, Nakate Tarta Sambandhaha, Swapna Drashturi Vanchasa, Shishukavacha, Atmamayam Riterachan, Parasyano Bhavatmanaha, Nakate Tarta Sambandhaha, Swapna Drashturi Vanchasa. Word to word, Shri Shukavacha. Shri Shukadeva Goswami said, Atma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mayam, energy, Rite, without, Rajan, O King, Parasya, of the pure soul, Anubhava Atmanaha, of the purely conscious, Na, never, Kateta, it can so happen, Artha, meaning, Sambandhaha, relation with the material body, Swapna, dream, Drashtuhu, of the seer, Eva, like, Anjasa, completely. Translation and puppet by Svangari Sabhaicharan Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shri Shukadeva Goswami said, O King, unless one is influenced by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no meaning to the relationship of the pure soul in pure consciousness with the material body. That relationship is just like a dreamer seeing his own body working. Purport. Maharaj Parikshit's question as to how a living entity began his material life, although he is apart from the material body and mind, is perfectly answered. The spirit soul is distinct from the material conception of his life, but he is absorbed in such a material conception because of being influenced by the external energy of the Lord, called Atma Maya. This has already been explained in the first canto in connection with Vyasadeva's realization of the Supreme Lord and his external energy. The external energy is controlled by the Lord, and the living entities are controlled by the external energy, by the will of the Lord. Therefore, although the living entity is purely conscious in his pure state, he is subordinate to the will of the Lord in being influenced by the external energy of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 15:15 also the same thing is confirmed. The Lord is present within the heart of every living entity, and all the living entities' consciousness and forgetfulness are influenced by the Lord. Now, the next question automatically made will be why the Lord influences the living entity to such consciousness and forgetfulness. The answer is that the Lord clearly wishes that every living entity be in His pure consciousness as a part and parcel of the Lord, and thus be engaged in the loving service of the Lord as He is constitutionally made. But because the living entity is partially independent also, he may not be willing to serve the Lord, but may try to become as independent as the Lord is. All the non-devotee living entities are desirous of becoming equally as powerful as the Lord, although they are not fit to become so. The living entities are illusioned by the will of the Lord because they wanted to become like Him. Like a person who thinks of becoming a king without possessing the necessary qualification, when the living entity desires to become the Lord Himself, he is put in a condition of dreaming that he is a king. Therefore, the first sinful will of the living entity is to become the Lord, and the consequent will of the Lord is the living entity forget his factual life and thus dream of the land of utopia where he may become one like the Lord. The child cries to have the moon from the mother, and the mother gives the child a mirror to satisfy the crying and disturbing child with the reflection of the moon. Similarly, the crying child of the Lord is given over to the reflection, the material world, to lord it over as karmi and to give this up in frustration to become one with the Lord. Both these stages are dreaming illusions only. There is no necessity of tracing out the history of when the living entity desired this. But the fact is that as soon as he desired it, he was put under the control of Atma Maya by the direction of the Lord. Therefore the living entity in his material condition is dreaming falsely that this is mine and this is I. The dream is that the conditioned soul thinks of his material body as I, or falsely thinks that he is the Lord and that everything in connection with that material body is mine. Thus only in dream does the misconception of I and mine persist life after life. This continues life after life as long as the living entity is not purely conscious of his identity as the subordinate part and parcel of the Lord. In his pure consciousness, however, there is no such misconceived dream, and in that pure conscious state, the living entity does not forget that he is never the Lord, but that he is eternally the servitor of the Lord in transcendental love. Om Jnanati Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chikshurun Militam Yena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadate Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Bharakamam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrachatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sachivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parichana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamshcha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpati Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhano Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpadurubhashcha Kripa Sandhya Vaja Patitanam Pavanebhya Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So today we're starting a new chapter, a very famous chapter. Answers by citing the Lord's version, and because it is in this very chapter, as we will later see, that we hear how the Lord, the first version of the Bhagavatam, how the Lord told the famous Chatushloki to Lord Brahma. And so we'll come to that later. But so what we started off today is that Shukadeva Goswami answers, because we know previous chapter was questions by Maharaj Parikshit, so many questions. And now Shukadeva Goswami is starting to answer. And it's a very powerful verse and purport, quite basic about our philosophy and our identity, but it's very powerful. Namely, it's describing, he's answering, as Prabhupada explains in the purport, as to how a living entity began his material life, although he's apart from the material body and mind. And this, so that is perfectly answered. So the question of, how come that we as a pure spiritual soul, actually having nothing to do with matter, that we come into this material existence and falsely identify with the body, with matter, and thus, are subject to all those miseries perpetually. And so, Shukadeva Goswami is answering. I'll just read the translation again, that Shukadeva Goswami said, "O king, unless one is influenced by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no meaning to the relationship of the pure soul in pure consciousness with the material body. That relationship is just like a dreamer seeing his own body working." So, so he clearly answers, how is that? It's simply only possible by the Lord's energy, by which energy? By the external energy or the inferior energy. And we know, still then the question is, how is it possible that if we are, there's those three energies, the Lord's internal energy, purely spiritual, then the marginal energy of which we are part of, which is also spiritual, but which is has the tendency to become subject to the inferior energy because of its tiny, in terms of quantity, being so tiny, even though in terms of quality being also spiritual, being also the superior energy. And then there's the external energy, which is in quality, which is inferior. Like Krishna himself tells also in Bhagavad Gita, which was apariyam itastyanyam praktim virime param jiva bhutam mahabaho daryat miss one word, daryate jagatate. When the living entity, who is actually param, who is the superior energy, he comes under the influence of the apada, the inferior energy, when he tries to exploit this very energy, this inferior energy. And thus he, struggles in material existence. And and similarly we know that's also asked by the four Kumaras, when they asked to Lord Brahma also, about this, how come that a spiritual soul can be even come under the control of this energy, and he actually at that time admits that he's bewildered by his activities of creation, came under the influence of passion, so he doesn't have clear spiritual intelligence at that time, and so he then Hamsavata appeared and spoke to the four Kumaras, and but then still the question is, okay, we are inferior in quantity, but still what determines then when do we come under the influence of this inferior energy and when not? And Prabhupada explains that nicely, and even in the verse we can understand, because Shukadeva Goswami says that unless one is influenced by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which indicates that yes, this energy is also directly under the control of Krishna, and so which means that he is the one who determines whether we are under the control of this energy, of the inferior energy, or under his internal energy, in which we are, which is our actual free state. Even, of course, we are always dependent. We know we are tiny living entities, so even in the liberated state, we are dependent on the Lord. But being under the control of his internal energy, that is actual freedom, because in that state we are not under the control of the three modes of material nature, which push us in different directions of how we desire to lord over the material energy, and thus how we become subject of its miseries. And whereas under the internal energy, we are simply out of our free will using it properly. We spontaneously desire actually to serve the Lord, and thus we are given all facilities for that, and like unlimited variety of how we can serve the Lord, and how did we all the pure devotees to serve the Lord. So that's actual freedom. Whereas, and as we hear in the purport, but how come that the Lord would put us under this inferior energy, putting us into misery? Then we know that is simply because even though we are fully dependent on the Lord and are minute, infinitesimal, we are still been given and always will have this small free will, because without that there would be no meaning to real love, because love can never be forced, always has to be voluntary and spontaneous. Otherwise, there's no love, and why would the Lord want anything less than real love? He is unlimited. He's all powerful, all potent, has all his Parasa Shakti Vivitaya Shivata. We know he has unlimited energies which perfectly work according to his sweet will. Anything that he desires is fulfilled without even him endeavoring at all for it, or even having to think about it. It's simply, everything exists for his pleasure. So why then would he not want pure, unconditional, unforced love? And we're fortunate enough, by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, that we also know a little bit of that. At least we might not have realized much of it on ourselves yet, but we must have experienced some bliss simply by hearing about it as well. When we hear of all those pure devotees and their pure devotion to the Lord, and especially then we know, of course, in Golok Vrindavana, which was also exhibited in Rajabhumi here on this earth, and of all those devotees like Mother Yashoda, Nanda Maharaj, his parents, and then especially, of course, the gopis, we know their love is completely inconceivable to us. How someone can be love in such a extraordinary way. So why would Krishna not want anything less than that? And so that's why every jiva has some independence, and which automatically means that some of the jivas will misuse it, and so we are some of them, and that's when and why the Lord hands us over to his external energy, which is also his energy, Atma Maya, as we hear today's verse also. And so let's briefly look through the purport, what Prabhupada, other points he mentions. He also mentions about that that also we could understand already earlier in Bhagavatam, when in first canto, when we hear about Srila Vyasadeva's realization of the Lord, because there we hear that he not only saw the Lord himself, but he also saw standing behind the Lord and personified his external energy, Maya Devi, but standing behind also indicates that that's not his internal energy, his first energy which directly acts for his pleasure, but it is that energy which he kind of, it's not his will that he employs here to put us to control some of his jivas, but he rather unwillingly or with a heavy heart he does, because simply to respect our free will. So that's we heard also earlier in Bhagavatam, and then Srila Prabhupada mentions that also in Bhagavad Gita 15:15. Again, it is confirmed how the living entity gets. So in terms of even in material life, that we being under the control of the external energy, that we are not aware of, that actually still, like even to come under the control of external energy, even for that, then we are also dependent on the Lord, and for all the activities and all the thoughts we do. We know that in that famous verse, Krishna tells us, Sarvasachaham Haridisana Vishto Mata Smitiyajnanam Apohanam Cha Vedashta Sarvyaham Eva Vedyo Vedantakrit Veda Vedya Vachaham. So in the especially famous second line, that Mata Smritya, from me come remembrance, Jnanam Apohanam Cha, knowledge and forgetfulness. And so we depend, on the Lord for anything that we want to remember, want to know. It's also only possible if the Lord, as the Super Soul, gives us the remembrance, and at the same time also to forget, we also depend on the Lord. So, and especially in that case, it refers to even being able to forget Krishna. For that, like, remember from one class of my Guru Maharaj that, where he explains that nicely, that like otherwise how can you imagine that when we have been, or had not have been, we were in Golok Vrindavan before, in experiencing Krishna fully, his unlimited beauty, sweetness, and everything. So how then would it ever be possible to forget him? Even if we had somehow or other, we got this desire to, how would it be? Wondering how would it be being like Krishna rather than directly serving him. So desire to imitate him, that's how we came here. But still, how would it be possible to forget him, even having such a thought or desire? So but Krishna, in order to fulfill that desire, he had to make us forget him. But he had to make, otherwise we wouldn't even have the power to forget Krishna. And it's so much so, he does employ that power that we completely forget about Krishna, not only about Krishna, but automatically then also about ourselves, and rather than, as we know, misidentify with the body and everything related to the body. And even then, life after life, we also, each time we die, then leave that one particular body, then we forget everything. When we then take on a new body, we forget everything about the previous life, and which is also quite extraordinary if you think about it. We don't know how many lifetimes we spent, but it must have been perhaps millions or even more, but we don't remember anything. Isn't so much we experienced in this material world already, but we don't know anything. We only subconsciously, yes, we have certain inclinations and proclivities that from those previous lifetimes as well, but we don't actively remember anything. So that's also, that's apohanam cha. That's the forgetfulness awarded by the Lord to fulfill our desire, to keep on going, constantly trying to still become successful in becoming materially happy. So, it's also the mercy of the Lord to, again, simply to fulfill our undue desires, respect our free will. So, so that's then the next paragraph Srila Prabhupada discussed, and so the next question, that why the Lord would us influence to such forgetfulness, and then he explained about the independence that and another point he describes, Srila Prabhupada, is also that after, we know, that in trying for material enjoyment, sooner or later everyone does become frustrated, and so that at one point the jivas then get the desire of, it doesn't go anywhere, just trying to be a successful karmi, so then they desire to become one with the Lord and just merge in the Lord, to be free from all the miseries, and in that way be equal with the Lord, equally powerful and everything. So, that's still not real liberation, as we know. So just another phase of Maya, as Prabhupada explains. And he gives then a nice example of that example of someone wanting to become a king, although he doesn't have the necessary qualification. So that is our wanting to become like the Lord, or wanting to become one with the Lord. That, it's not, we know constitutionally we are so made that we are his subordinate servants, as Srila Prabhupada explains here. But we want to compete with him, we want to be equal with him. And that's just as if someone who doesn't have any qualifications but whimsically just says and wants, so I want to be a king, I want to be president or anything. Like, we know it's doesn't make any sense, and no one would respect such a person. He would think, he's just a madman. So that's what all of us are actually in that sense. Wanting to compete with Krishna, wanting to enjoy materially, that's simply mad, because it has nothing to do with our real identity, which is to simply serve him unconditionally in transcendental loving service, but is completely alien to us. And so then Prabhupada gives another nice example of an explanation for that. So the connection he gives for that is in between that. So us forgetting our factual life as a servant and wanting to be like Krishna puts us into this dreamland of utopia where he may become one like the Lord. And then he gives the example of just like a child sometimes might, looking up in the sky, seeing the moon, cries because he might desire to also to get the moon. Then what can the mother do to pacify the child? She will give the child a mirror so that the child looking into the mirror sees then the reflection of the moon and becomes pacified in that way. And so that's, Prabhupada says, that's the same thing that Krishna has to do with us in order to satisfy our undue desire to imitate him by handing us over to the reflection, namely to the material world. We know material world is compared also by Krishna himself explains in Bhagavad Gita in 15th chapter that it's just like a banyan tree reflected on the water, so it's like a reflection upside down, and which also shows how the topmost thing in the spiritual world is the lowest in the material world. That's why we know the grossest, most intense desire or expression of that desire to be like Krishna and to rebel against him is if we engage in illicit sex. Whereas in the spiritual world, we know that's the most intimate, the topmost loving exchange of Krishna with his topmost devotees, with the gopis. So that's the reflection that we are dealing with. And then Prabhupada concludes with about how this illusion, the main aspects of that being this aham mameti, that we are coming under control of the external energy, that we do falsely identify with the material body as I and anything related to it as mine, although we are neither matter nor are we the proprietor of anything. Everything belongs to the Lord, everything is His energy, and we are also His energy, and thus our real proper position is to serve Him, to employ ourselves and any other energy facilities that we may get, also in the service of the Lord. As I quoted a few times before, from Lord Kapiladev's instructions to Mother Devahuti in 27th chapter of the 3rd canto, that to get free from that influence and again become situated in our constitutional position, we need to need to realize the futility of material life. So, we need to employ everything in the service of the Lord rather than trying to enjoy it. So, like Lord Kapila says there, that Bhukta Bhoga Parityakta. I forgot another second line. Okay, let me start with the first line, maybe it comes then. So he, second line, Trishta dosha cha nitya jaha, because he Trishta dosha, he sees the fault of what? Of trying to enjoy bhoga, trying to enjoy matter for his pleasure. And so thus he gives it up, parityakta, and cha nitya jaha, at all times he knows that I'm simply the servant of the Lord. It's pointless for me at any time to try to lord over the material energy. And in that way, he then, as I described before also, that's actually our real independent situation, that we become independent of the influence of the free modes. Because the free modes act only, are part of the material energy and act, cannot act on anyone who is realized his spiritual identity. And and giving up the material desires. So that's then the third line, that Nishvarasvara Dasa, that he's the real Isvara, he's really independent, and thus the material energy Ashubham Datte, she cannot inflict anything inauspicious, anything on such a jiva. And having realized that, being situated like that, that is his real glorious position, his real greatness. Sve mahimni stitasya cha. And we know there's those two parts of it that we always need to hear and meditate on, try to realize, namely first, what we, just more the aspect of today as class, that we need to realize the futility of material enjoyment, of material life, and at the same time hear of the opposite, of the most glorious, most beautiful, transcendental pastimes and qualities of the Lord and His devotees. So side by side, we cannot jump just kind of Sajya mentality that we think, I just only want to hear of the most sweetest pastimes of the Lord, and I'll become so attracted with that I forget automatically everything about material life. It's true to some, in one way, that yes, they are the qualities and pastimes of the Lord, they are purely transcendental, and simply hearing about them does cleanse our heart, and thus automatically, gradually, we do become detached from material enjoyment. But at the same time, we have to understand that we are, most of us at least, in a very beginning stage where we are still heavily contaminated. We are heavily diseased of having, even though theoretically we may understand, but still in our heart we still think that we can get some happiness by lording over the material nature. And so we need to strengthen our spiritual intelligence also by properly understanding thoroughly the futility of material enjoyment. And so for that, maybe take out some points because I'm reading currently about that, in the instructions of Lord Kapila Dev, where he describes to Mother Devahuti that very powerfully, directly, all those different aspects of material life. And so it's particularly, he starts it off in chapter 30, where I'll just take out some points. So one point I found very interesting there that Lord Kapila describes is that he's saying that no matter in whatever species we are, we find a particular type of satisfaction. Because it's amazing, like if you think about it, that we know there's 8.4 million species, and many of them are like the lower species. They are for us, when we look at them, they are so obviously miserable. Like I don't know, let's say some insects who just live 1 or 2 days and struggle to somehow get some food and procreate, and in that way think to make their life successful. Or there's like so many different living entities they have, or we know the famous example Trinada Pisonichina Toroa Pisa Hishnuna. There's the tree, it's how much they have to tolerate. They are standing out there in the cold heat, anything, for hundreds of years sometimes, or even some of them thousands of years. They cannot move, no matter if the person comes by and spits at them, or cuts them, hits them, or even cuts them down. Like in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains here, when he explains about this, because we know that's the attitude that we wanted to develop, to become as a devotee, to become as tolerant as a tree. And so he explains there, to understand a bit more, what does it mean to be, why is a tree so tolerant? So he explains there that a tree, even if he dries up, he would never ask for water, nor if someone cuts him down, would he ever protest. That's how, as a elevated Vaishnavas look at it, to wanting to imbibe those qualities, which is pure and great to meditate on. But at the same time, we know, why does a tree like that? It is not that a tree is a pure devotee, rather a tree is forced to be in that position. So it is a very miserable form of existence. But still, Lord Kapiladiv explains, by the power of the external energy, in whatever species one is, one finds a particular type of satisfaction. So much so that then in the next verse he explains that this one is very little inclined to cast off the body, even when one is in hell. And rather, in whatever position, even in hellish life, one finds some enjoyment and never wants to leave the body. And then how he explains the reason for that, and he says that is due to the deep-rooted attraction for the body and anything related to the body, the wife, the children, house, land, animals, all of that. So, and thus then he explains there in chapter 30 about such an attached householder, a grihamedi, about this deep-rooted attraction, so what implication it has, and like how he lives that out. And he mentions some points like that. In order to, because such a person, he thinks that his prime duty is simply to maintain his family very nicely, earn as much money as he can, and thus provide for his family. And so, but then many times they might struggle to get the money in a proper way, and then they might secure it illegally. But the amazing thing about that is that we know that if he does that, then he will have to face the reactions. He will go to hell, for even though he himself might not enjoy anything or not much of that money, he just might use it to provide for his family, but still he is responsible for the sinful activity. And actually, also then later, he explains that, when he explains about death, that also that money that one has acquired through his lifetime by envying other living entities is the passage money in which he leaves this world. And Prabhupada explains there that what this means, such money is that, the money itself, you can't take anything when you leave the body with you, so definitely no money. And so the money he leaves behind in this world, but the reaction of how he acquired the money, he has to take with him. So he has to suffer for the sins that he committed, how to secure the money. And also in the purport in text 10 about securing the money by committing violence, Prabhupada explains there another nice point, that one one cannot satisfy his dependence by this illusory service, although one cannot get out of the service because servant is the constitutional position. So, yeah, so such a Grihamedi, he thinks that he will be successful if he very nicely maintains his family, earns money nicely, but fact is, for some time, okay, they might apparently be happy with him if he's successful, but actually, he can, as Prabhupada explains, one cannot satisfy his dependence by this illusory service, because that kind of service is fully under Maya, serving actually the Lord's external energy. And so, but at the same time, yeah, even when we think we want just to lord over material nature, we cannot get out of it, because we are always servant in whatever position. We just might not be aware of it. And yeah, so, and rather than Lokapiladev goes on to explain that when he then cannot provide some time to his family, then they won't respect him anymore, and he gives the example, just like a miserly farmer won't give the same nice treatment as he did before to an old worn out oxen, and oxen who cannot whom he doesn't get profit out anymore. So in the same way with old people, we unfortunately we see that also, like that's why people then they tend to put old people into some some old age homes or something, because they become simply a burden, and that's also that's the way it is if we don't, as Prabhupada explains there also in the purport. That's why the Vedic system is like that. We know that you're supposed to take Vanaprastha when you're 50 years old, and in that way that automatically solves also this problem of becoming a burden then for the rest of the family. And rather, because the actual goal is spiritual realization, which you would pursue in that way. And Prabhupada explains there as well that actually not only does he, because he's not liked anymore if he can't provide for his family, so not only given proper respect, like Lokapiladev says that, but he's actually completely neglected many times and just treated as, and Lokapiladev also goes on that basically such an old person is then at his home just like a dog giving some food, but actually no one likes him, no one cares about him. And we know that example also heard that earlier in the first canto with Dhritarashtra, that's how he was a famous example of such a Grihamedi, until Vidura came to preach to him heavily and got him liberated. But until that, it was also there nicely explained how he was actually there just like a dog being given food by Bhima, who hated him. And so but that's how that's one aspect. There's many things about material life, how it is if we don't take to spiritual life. And maybe we'll just conclude with also about so Satya Grihamedi, he thinks then that let's first start from the other way around. So Prabhupada explains there into chapter text 15 in the purport that actually, as we know, because one is supposed to already take Vanaprastha before, and then so what to speak at then of the time of death, that an actual glorious death is if the family doesn't even know about it. It doesn't even know where we are or anything, especially for a man at least. And whereas the Grihamedi, we see that nowadays that he thinks that he's successful in life at the end then, or in his death, if his body is taken on a very nice procession, very pompously, but we know what does it mean that he's concerned about that, he's happy if that is the case, but he has no idea whatsoever and doesn't worry about where he as the soul actually goes or what happens to him, because he knows in such a procession the body is dead. So what's the point? But still he is concerned about that, and not concerned about where he will go. So yeah, that's the power of the Lord's external energy. That's some examples, and yeah, that's why we better take everything we can to surrender fully under the Lord, and then come directly under His internal energy. Okay, so thank you for your time. Kranta Chima Bhagavatam Ki.